We work in London. We're born of London institutions, but we're actually an organisation that works for London and the greater southeast of England. And we're all about economic growth from life sciences. So what we're about as an organisation is to help develop the life sciences base across the whole of the region. And one of the ways in which we're doing that is to work with competitions like OneStart, which is seeding new companies. The purpose of our session today is really to get you thinking about markets and the markets that your products will be sold into. Many of you will be based in the UK, not all of you, but whether you are based here or not, the NHS is likely to be a key market for you, but it's not the only one. And markets work in different ways. They have different pay systems, they're organised in different ways, and it's really important that you think about this as you're developing your business. Because how you're going to sell into the market cannot be something that's bolted on at the end of the business plan. So what we're hoping to achieve today is a little bit of a better understanding for you about some of the issues that you need to be thinking about. We've got a great panel for you. I'm going to go through and ask each member to introduce themselves and say a few words about where they come from. So Anna, can I start with you, please?
Good morning. My name's Anna King and I'm the Commercial Director at the Health Innovation Network. The Health Innovation Network is an NHS organisation focused around the spread of innovations in the UK that improve health outcomes and also supporting the development of the healthcare sector to generate economic growth. So we work very closely with MedCity and really interested to work with small organisations like yours.
So my name is Sundiatu Dixon-Fyle. I'm a junior partner or senior healthcare expert at McKinsey & Company, which is a global management consultancy firm. One of the things we do is healthcare, and within McKinsey we have got a fairly sizable health systems and services as well as pharmaceutical and medical products practices, and we advise our clients on all matters related to their performance. I specifically work with payers and commissioners, and that's the contribution I'd like to make here today.
My name is Gajraj. I'm an advisor with the Scientific Advice Program at NICE. NICE itself is a large organization, and its main aim is to make sure that practice within the NHS is evidence-based and keeps up with the latest developments. It's better known for being the body that says no to drugs and technologies. The scientific advice that I work for works with developers of pharmaceutical products and medical technologies, trying to make sure that the evidence they generate at the development stage of the product is suitable for an appraisal down the line by NICE.
Thank you. And good morning all. I'm James Ryan. I'm one of the, I head up the Health Economics and Payer Analytic team at AstraZeneca Global. I sort of specialise primarily in oncology, but I'm there to help ensure we have the evidence that we need for our end markets, if that's the UK, Germany, Europe, Asia or the US. But I actually have a lot of background in health economics and worked in medical devices, diagnostics, imaging agents, as well as therapeutics.
Great, thanks, James. So we're going to kick off with a short presentation from Ellie. Everyone here, I'm sure, will have heard of NICE. But Ellie's going to give us a quick overview around health technology assessment and evidence. We'll then go into some discussion with the panel, and then there'll be the opportunity for you to ask us some questions at the end.
Okay. The picture that we start with that is the mythical beast, in Greek mythology at least, Cerberus, that guarded the underworld. And the reason I put that up is that it's obvious that you stand at the beginning of a long path. And I think the previous presentation suggested to me that you guys have a lot on your plate to worry about, but you shouldn't lose sight of the end, and the end is the market. And at least in the UK, the market is the NHS. And one way of getting into that market is through NICE. Now, the dog allowed souls, disembodied souls in. So NICE allows cost-effective and effective technologies in. The dog let nobody out, nothing out. That's a role that NICE does not fulfill. So the 3 steps to conceptualize your approach to NICE. Very early on, you need to think about your value proposition. You need to consider what value you are going to bring to the health system. You then need to think about what evidence you are going to generate to support that value proposition. And then somewhere down the line, you need to put all that together in a format that is acceptable to NICE, so that NICE can make an appraisal. To keep the Greek metaphor going, that is Demeter. She is the Greek god of harvests. She got past the dog. She needed to get her daughter Persephone, who had been kidnapped by Hades, into the underworld. She needed to get her daughter out. So she got past the dog by using sweet drugged cakes. So if all that doesn't work, that's a hint of what you guys can do. Okay, so just broadly thinking about what NICE considers as value. And I take the point Sarah made that health systems are different. Luckily enough, people aren't. So wherever you go in the world, what's value remains the same, things that improve health. And that's the same wherever you go. That's what people want. Just to add that little caveat in there, for example, NICE would consider that a treatment at the end of life, that extended life, was a little more value. So the details may vary, but I think the principle of improving health remains the same. Saving costs, that's again a no-brainer. Wherever you go in the world, people would be happy if you save them money. NICE, surprisingly enough, is interested in innovation. It's very difficult to say what that is, but we are for it. The other things that NICE was set up to do mainly was to reduce health inequalities or the postcode lottery. That's another issue that's within NICE's remit. And significant health benefits is a little grayed out. Significant benefits other than health is that if there are other priorities for the government or for society, and the benefits are not felt within the health system, but say in education or in prisons, then with special dispensation from the Department of Health, NICE can take these into consideration. The next couple of slides are slightly technical. How does NICE measure health? So I think the basic concept is that health can be improved either by extending life or improving its quality. And these are the only 2 dimensions along which you can make things better. And NICE uses something called the quality adjusted life here to measure it. So these are the 2 axes. So you can, years of life, you can improve survival, or you can improve quality of life, whatever that may mean. So if you, down here we say quality of life is 0 if you're dead and 100% if you're in perfect health, which I hope all of you are today. If you live 1 year at perfect health, that's 1 QALY. So in a sense, if it becomes obvious when you say, if you live 1 year at half of perfect health, whatever that may mean, that's half a QALY. So the length of life has been adjusted for the quality, and NICE uses the QALY to measure health gain. Simple concept. The devil is in the detail of how you calculate these things. The other issue is costs, and what costs are relevant to NICE. And it's not just the cost of the product, and that's an important issue to think about when you think about the costs associated with your product, but costs more widely. So your product may need outpatient visits, may have adverse effects which need managing. It may need hospital stays, physiotherapy, background costs. It's all these costs together. Okay, so all costs involved with introducing your product into the health system. So two key questions that NICE asks, putting health and costs together, are how well does your technology work compared with established practice in the NHS? And established practice is important. You're compared to what's already being done. The doors of the NHS are never closed. All patients are offered something. Sometimes that's just a cup of tea. That's established practice. Then that's what you need to be compared to. And then the course of action with your new technology compared to established practice, and what are the change in costs. So it's important to quantify the incremental costs and benefits. The next slide is unhelpfully titled, How much does NICE pay for health? It's a simple way to think of it. It's not exactly what NICE it does, but what NICE does is look at the difference in costs and difference in qualities and calculate something called an incremental cost effectiveness ratio, which is simply the ratio of the difference in costs and qualities. We call it the cost per quality, and NICE has a threshold which is somewhere between 20 and 30,000 pounds per quality. This is to end, a quote from an economist called Joan Robinson. She is a proper economist, a monetary economist, a Keynesian. I really don't know much about her, but this quote is interesting. The reason you learn economics is to prevent economists from hoodwinking you. And that leads me nicely into a plug for some seminars we do where we try to help you avoid being hoodwinked by economists. And there are seminars aimed at pharma companies, medtech companies, and regen meds. And you can either give me your details and we'll get in touch with you, or keep an eye out on our website to register for these. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that, Ellie. So we're going to talk over the next half an hour or so about different components of the system, the market system. And Anna, I'm going to start with you. As somebody who works in an academic health science network, you work across the whole range of providers, primary, secondary, tertiary, specialist care, and also, in fact, with commissioners. But today, you're going to talk about the provider landscape. So I guess it's quite easy to start off by thinking that the challenge is to get somebody just to prescribe your product, whether it's a drug, a device, an app, or whatever. But maybe you could set out some of the issues and complexities around the actual landscape for providers.
Thank you, Sarah. I think one of the things, troubles people have in coming to the UK health market in particular is understanding the NHS. It is a very big entity, and one of the kind of the concepts people have is they think of it as a single organisation, like a single company, and it's not really. It's more akin to an industry. And it's very important when you're developing your business opportunity that you've at least got some idea of who the eventual customer is. Because the strategy you need if you're planning a research product and you're targeting, say, the 11 genomic medicine centres in the UK is very different from if you've got a product that you're going to be wanting to sell into the 8,000 or so different GP practices. One of the ways that I tend to think about this is what I tend to call the 4 Ps. So often you've got to think of what the patient needs, and in particular, if you sort of take an example of a wound care product, for example, you may have a new high-tech wound care product that dramatically reduces the time for a wound to heal or the chance of infection. But you've actually got to convince an individual nurse to choose your particular wound product over the range of wound products that are appropriate for that patient. And that's kind of the prescriber or the the person who makes the individual purchasing decision at the point of use. But you also need to make sure that the provider that the nurse works for actually stocks your product, and that's the kind of the provider of the healthcare services. But in all these cases also there's two other kind of key stakeholders that are important to consider as well. The patient themselves, because if there's a clear benefit from using the product, you'll need to be thinking about them. And also the payer, because obviously if the product's more expensive and the clinical outcome might be better, you need to convince them that they need to be specifying the use of that product in order to make sure that they get the improved outcome. And that's where NICE comes in, and the commissioners that you'll hear more about later. So it really is thinking about those 4 Ps, you know, the patient, the prescriber, the payer and the provider. And there is a huge diversity in those different organisations.
Great, thank you. Sundiatu, you've been doing quite a lot of work across the whole of the health service, I should say, in your practice in McKinsey. Today, you're going to talk from the perspective of the payers. I wonder if to start with, you could just explain a little bit about the commissioning landscape as it exists in the UK at the moment.
Okay, sure. So I think it's quite interesting to observe the kind of evolution that commissioning has been through in the UK. It's now a slightly different landscape to what it was before. Commissioners exist at the regional level. They're called clinical commissioners. There's about 211 of them. These are the foremost of primary care trusts, and these are GP-led organizations that hold about 60 billion budget at the local level and commission acute services, mental health services, and community-based services for their population. And then at the regional level, as well as at the national level, you've got NHS England that deal with primary care commissioning and specialist commissioning, and a lot of your products will end up being used by the specialist commissioners, which are done at the regional level in NHS England. NHS England also exists at the sort of national level, defining sort of overall commissioning strategy. So this is a relatively changed landscape, it's a relatively fragmented landscape, which has its pros and cons. On the pro side, it is now a much more clinically led commissioning landscape at the local level, but at the same time it also means that it is more complicated for you to navigate than it was previously. I think it would also be interesting to kind of highlight some of the challenges that commissioners are facing. The biggest challenge is unquestionably the financial challenge. Some of you may have heard that the NHS is facing the famous 30 billion gap in its funding by 2021. The NHS budget is about 100 billion in total, and there will be this shortfall which puts tremendous pressure on commissioners, which means that the first thing at the top of their mind is going to be value for money, the combination of cost effectiveness. So that is translated into, does it deliver the right quality outcomes first and foremost? Does it do so in a cost-effective way, which will have a positive impact on the health system as a whole? So it's not just about demonstrating clinical efficacy and safety in a particular clinical trial context. It's actually being able to show that this product improves outcomes for the patient as well, which includes sort of patient satisfaction, ease of use, and adherence, as well as positive impact on the health system as a whole. Does it lead to overall reduced utilization of health services? Does it lead to reduced hospital readmission rates? Does it lead to reduced rates of unplanned hospital admissions? So these are the sorts of things which commissioners have at the top of their mind, and which I think it is helpful for you to sort of bear in mind as you think about how you're going to position your products to them.
Great, thank you. So moving on, Ali, you've talked a bit about the role of NICE, and Sundiatu's just referred there to really understanding cost and benefit. Could you say a little bit about the kind of evidence that that companies need to be producing in order to help make the case for the value for money case for their product?
Yes, I think if we say that NICE is interested in health, and health has two dimensions. you need to be able to link whatever your product does to in some way improving the length of life or the quality of life. So that's the evidence that needs to be generated. I think when you come to pharmaceuticals, that's part of the regulatory process. When you come to devices, that may not be part of the CE marking process that I think we touched upon. CE marking just says that your device does what it says on the tin. It doesn't actually then make that link into how it's improving health for individual patients. I think what you need to be thinking about at the evidence generation stage is how you're going to link what your product does to changes in costs and changes in health benefits. And there's a lot of detail in how that's done by NICE. We work extensively with other HTA bodies across Europe, and I think increasingly we're asking the same questions. So it's probably, you can think about it from the perspective of NICE, but it's applicable more widely.
Great, thank you. So we've had a bit of a focus on the UK system and the NHS to start off with. James, AstraZeneca is obviously selling into markets across the whole of the world. Could you start by just telling us a little bit more about some of the other market dynamics that you think need to be thought about as you're developing a product?
Yeah, sure. It's strange in a sense that NICE and the UK have one approach, and actually a lot of the markets sort of are some component of that. But it's really clear that the UK is just one market of many. We generally categorise payers into three types. One's the cost effectiveness, which is a very explicit market. This is how we're going to measure health and the health benefit, and this is how we're going to assess cost, although they may do that slightly differently. So some markets will look at productivity. If you get somebody back to work, that's good. They may also look at, can you avoid sick pay and the impact on insurance funds. Other markets, and for example, we've got Germany and France in Europe, tend to focus more on the sort of comparative clinical effectiveness. So rather than sum everything up into the concept of a QALY, they're really looking at how do you compare against what we actually do in practice. So what's your additional clinical benefit? Are you any better than that? And what degree of certainty have you brought to that? And then once they've made that assessment, then it's into the negotiations on what is the reimbursed price that they will do. Other markets may be slightly different. So the US is by far the biggest market for many companies. And that differs. So once it's sort of got onto the regulatory approval and it's had buy-in from the clinicians, then it's really into negotiations with a lot of the payers. And they could be separate insurance funds, or it could be the US government themselves. And the focus there is what is the clinical benefit, but also what are the cost implications of putting you on. I think ultimately all of them are thinking about what is the impact this has on the patient, and what is the impact that this has on the healthcare system itself. They may measure that slightly differently, put different weights on that, but from a pharmaceutical perspective, just making sure that we've got that evidence, and even in that phase 1 design, we're ensuring that actually we're going to be able to prove that and it's meaningful to payers and patients, or change clinical decision making is critical.
Thank you. So we've set out, obviously, to start off with, that there are quite a lot of different things that you need to think about. So going across the panel, recognising your different areas of expertise and the different roles that you're playing here today, I wonder whether each of you in turn, starting with Anna, could say a little bit about how people can get help and advice, understanding how to address this issue. So Anna, would you like to start off?
Sorry. Yes, this is a problem that the NHS is very conscious of, and this is why we set up the Academic Health Science Network about 18 months ago, and there's actually 15 academic health science networks across the country, and part of their role is to help small businesses, particularly those located in the UK, but elsewhere as well if there's a considerable health benefit, access the market and give advice about where it's best to target your particular products or services, whether it's something that you need to be thinking about the primary care market and tackling the GPs and the community nurses, or whether it's something for secondary care. So there's 15 nationally, there's 3 of us here in London. Health Innovation Network is one of those, and you can find us on the internet, but you know, feel free to call those organisations wherever you happen to be based.
Great. Sundiatu, what about from the commissioner side? Is there anything available to help providers of products and services engage with the commissioners and understand what they're looking for in terms of things that will help them make decisions about whether to procure products or not?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly from the commissioning side, I would recommend the specialist commissioning local area team issue guidelines, they issue commissioning guidelines and specifications for how specific diseases should be approached and certain pathways should be approached. So, for example, there would be one on obesity or etc. So if you literally go to the local area team's specialist commissioning arms, you'll be able to find some of these specifications that describe pathways and that describe the standards to which the NHS will commission to. Because as a commissioning organisation, it's all about setting standards and defining optimal pathways and models of care that providers have to adhere to. And by providers, I extend to the uses of pharmaceutical and medical products that these providers use. So I would suggest that the commissioning guidelines would be a great source.
Okay. Ellie, when you gave your talk, you mentioned that there are a number of events and seminars which may be a surprise to people. I guess people might think that they only come knocking on NICE's door when they're ready to ask you to make an assessment. So could you say a little bit more about some of the services that NICE has sitting around?
Yes, I think the bit of NICE I work for, scientific advice, was set up because people were knocking at the door and saying, here's my product, can you take a look at it? And NICE was saying, where's the evidence? And the evidence either just did not exist or was not optimal. So that's what my program does. It's an opportunity to interact with NICE and the experts we identify so that we can together decide what is the best evidence you can go about generating. Just looking at that product development line from an earlier presentation, we would be interested in interacting with you when you come to designing your trials in humans. We don't have very much experience with anything else. So when you're putting together some trial plans for testing in humans, then we can advise on that. There are the seminars. The seminars is just to give you an idea of NICE and health economics. I just wanted to also mention the NOCRI, the National Institute of Health Research Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure. Is that connected with the health networks?
Yes, we do link in with that.
Okay,
that's another source of information.
I mean, I'm speaking for someone else, but there are clinical research networks across the country which are groups of investigators and infrastructures set up so you can easily access trialists and patients within the NHS. Just the last thing to say is that NICE also will aid you in implementation. So once NICE has assessed your product, then there is an implementation part of NICE that will help you get your product into the market, because that's, again, not automatic.
James, what advice would you give in terms of sources of help and advice?
Yeah, I think first of all is taking up different payers' opportunities to provide scientific advice in the first place. We've certainly gone to NICE for scientific advice at a range of different stages of development. If that's just after phase 1 as we're planning phase 2, it can be as we're going into phase 3, or we may actually be in that phase 3 anyway, and it's around what do we get a sense of the level of evidence that we have. is there anything else we need to supplement that by? But NICE has one on the scientific advice. Germany, France also offers something very similar. The regulatories, there's an increased sort of role between regulators and the sort of health technology assessment payers getting together to try and see where that evidence requirement is the same. So I'd really look at those opportunities. I'd also look at the websites and the decisions that payers make. Now, some countries that's more explicit than others. In the UK, we've got the Scottish Medicines Consortium, we've got NICE, and the All Wales Medical Medicine Strategy Group. Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, Sweden, Germany also do publications on how they've evaluated either pharmaceuticals or devices themselves. And I think the third area that I would look at is, as you're approaching companies and just find out, do they have a sort of payer evidence or a health economics department themselves, and say, actually, we'd really benefit chatting to one of the health economists in that. I'm certainly open to that, and I'm sure a lot in my department would be as part of this collaboration. But as long as you remember, it's the standard of care in the country, getting the right comparator and thinking of the patient right at the end, rather than the mechanism of action or how the device works, it's what impact does that have, you're on a good footing.
Great, thank you. Just to mention the Clinical Research Network. So there are, again, is it 15? I can't remember. There are 15 clinical research networks across the UK. There is also something called the Clinical Research Coordinating Centre, which is a single access point. So if you are looking at establishing clinical trials, and clearly this is going to be some way down the path for many of you, but there is a single point that can help you access the NHS and get trials set up in multiple centres within the UK. So we have very good infrastructure to allow that to happen. We've talked maybe a little bit about products that are maybe much more on the drugs kind of end of the spectrum. And many of you in the room will have products that are typically devices, or indeed might be in the space that Anna and I would refer to as digital health, which is much more about tech being applied into the healthcare setting. I wonder, just opening it up to all of you, whether you had any thoughts on what is different about tech products and the way that these are approached by the different organisations that you're representing.
I mean, I have to say a little bit to start with. So, I mean, one of the things about digital health is obviously the life cycle is a lot faster than it is in drug development. And really, we come across a lot of companies that really can get a product to market in months rather than years. So that makes it a very exciting area for us all to operate in. I think one of the challenges of that is often it's very difficult to generate revenues for those types of businesses, primarily because sometimes the savings that occur from the use of the products occur in different organisations within the health economy than those that actually have to pay for the use of the service. So we work with quite a few companies within that space because it's one of the areas where really you need to join up the different bits of the health system in order to make those purchasing decisions. So I think that's quite an interesting aspect of them. So things in that category I would put as things like, I don't know, apps for people managing diabetes, that manage the lifestyle issues, manage the insulin monitoring, and blood glucose and all the rest of it. So I think that there's some quite interesting products in that space, but they are quite difficult to create the compelling business case. So it is worth speaking to us earlier rather than later.
Yes, I would say that from a commissioner's point of view, this is a hugely exciting and potentially disruptive area, the area of digital health. The potential, given just the scale of data and the analytical firepower that's needed in the NHS, the potential for digital technologies to really revolutionize that and allow risk stratification, identification of high-risk patients, tailoring of health solutions and provider solutions around them, facilitating transactions, enabling new models of remote care, including teleconsultation, including things like in mental health, online CBT. This is hugely exciting, I would say, for payers, and I would absolutely encourage anyone with ideas in that area to go and talk to commissioners and payers about that. It is also relatively challenging, and particularly if you are in the B2B space, there are huge constraints on access to data in particular. Access to medical records, which you would need in order to be able to either support, for example, care planning and coordination of care for individual patients. That access is extremely controlled, tightly controlled by the NHS. And then also the whole process of procurement is a fraught one, because you might have to go and talk to an individual hospital, because it would be quite challenging to go and talk at a regional level and get an entire region to commission your product. I would say that in the B2C space, things are a lot more fluid, and that's where you see a hell of a lot of innovation, disruptive innovation, new market entrants coming in. You've all heard of Babylon, you've all heard of ZocDoc. This is a space which is faster moving than the B2B space, in my view, and offers huge opportunities. So I would say, it's exciting, challenging, but at the same time, it's something which is an area which is going to grow extremely fast, I would say.
So that's clearly an important message, which is understanding. Are you selling directly to the consumer? So is this something that we as individuals elect to purchase as a product, which is part of our discretionary spend, or is this actually something where there is a clinical gatekeeper, somebody that is prescribing your product, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, a GP, and indeed one of the things, and perhaps we'll touch on this if we've got a moment at the end, also to think about is and understand is that the healthcare system at the moment is completely separate and funded in a completely different way from the social care system as well. So understanding whether your gatekeeper is actually in a completely different part of the system is important. James, I'll jump to you because you were sort of smiling wryly, I thought, as Sundiatu was speaking. So what are your thoughts on digital health?
So I think on digital health, I just made a comment around sort of patient management and care planning, but also have a think about how it can help input into the development process itself. So when we have patient-reported outcomes or quality of life questionnaires in the clinical trials, you can do that paper-based, or you can do it on a tablet or something that the patient can take home. That sort of detail, you can actually administer it on a day-by-day basis, and it brings accuracy in the data, engagement with the patient, and real-life data back into that. So it's also think around that development side as well on the digital side of stuff.
Great, thanks, James. Ellie, any thoughts from your side? Have you had many digital health products come seeking health technology assessment?
I'm not even sure what a digital health product is. We'll probably answer the question. I think the medical technologies evaluation program has had some referred, and they haven't actually made it through the committee that decides what goes ahead. I just probably just pick up on a couple of things. One is that NICE is now National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, so hopefully as we go forward, it isn't going to be two different things, but looking at healthcare and social care as a continuum. I'm just looking at the one-line explanations, say, let's call them that, of the projects, and they're broadly, in my mind, fell into three categories. One are either medications or devices that are going to actually be applied to the patient, and there's one way of thinking about evidence generation there. Much of the time, if it's a drug, you're going to be doing the trial anyway, and what you need to do is just make sure that you collect the evidence that NICE requires. The second set of products were diagnostics. Now, diagnostics never come near a patient, and you could just prove they work, but then the important thing is, how does changing diagnostic improve patients' outcomes? Because diagnostics don't cure anybody. The third kind of product here was technologies, which may have multiple applications. And for those, you're going to need to break it down into specific applications and think about collecting the evidence for them.
Great, thank you.